So today we're going to talk about the new normal, and are we there yet? So normal is a relative term, and we're going to kind of dive into a little bit about normalcy. All right, Andrew, go ahead. All right, so there's several ways to engage on our Be Strong Families webinars. The first one is when you're ready to speak, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll ask you to unmute yourself and to share your screen or to share your video if you can. If not, that's okay too. Feel free to type your comment in the group chat and make sure it's going into everyone. So use that down caret. And then be patient with us. We're going to try to get to as many of the comments as possible. There's some written directions for you that will remain in the chat, just in case you forget. So we can make this space as safe as possible, we're going to use our Be Strong Families agreements today. The first one, speak from your own experience. Tell your own story. Use I statements. Use the golden rule. Treat other people like you want to be treated. Number 3 is bring your full presence. No multitasking, please. So don't toggle over to your email or try to get a couple things done. Give yourself this gift. Give yourself the gift of letting your heart hear other people's stories and sharing your own. And the last one is, if you need a minute, take a minute. If you agree to help us keep this space safe, go ahead and type, like Colette and Jasmine and Emily already did, I agree into the chat. Awesome. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. Yep, I'm seeing them all coming in now. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Kind of excited to talk about this. So before we start really talking about the new normal, let's kind of talk about what's going on. So when we're talking about are we there yet, we're talking about the pandemic and all of the things that are going on and all of the huge changes we've all had to make. We kind of have a little bit, or maybe I should just speak for myself and say, I kind of have emotional whiplash here. All right. Going back and forth. Kids are in school, kids are out of school. I have to wear a mask. I don't have to wear a mask. I can have my family over for holidays. Oh, but only 10 people. So if you're like me, you're feeling a little bit untethered. On this slide, we're going to talk about navigating to the new normal and how grief plays a part in that. So there's a couple different types of grief. Those of you who have ever taken a class on grieving or grieving has been part of a class you've taken, you know that grief comes in various forms. So first, grieving losses. This is people, jobs, tangibles, things. So by tangibles, I mean I lost my iPhone, or my laptop is broken, or maybe even my pet, which some of us lump those in with people. The next one is grieving and longing. And this is, it's not conscious wanting, but it's an involuntary yearning for the opportunity to regain what was lost. So this encompasses that first one. And then the last one, feeling lost. And this is looking to reorient to every part, to our physical, our emotional, and our social worlds. So for me, I'm dealing with a lot in the second and the third one. I don't have a conscious wanting, but I do have an involuntary yearning for normalcy, to be able to go with my friends, to sit in a restaurant and not worry if the person at the next table has COVID. I'm also looking to reorient, like figure out what the next steps are. And all of these things can be part of a bigger concept called disenfranchised grief. It's a less studied form of grief, and it's typically not acknowledged or publicly supported through mourning practices. All right, does that make sense to people? And this is where it plays in with COVID for me. No one is having, when somebody dies, we have a funeral. When somebody moves away, when they retire, which is another loss to like their callings, we have a retirement party. There's mourning practices. There's rituals to move forward. Oh, Maggie, I'm sorry, I didn't see your comment. Especially with family and friends that aren't on the same page with vaccines. Holy moly, Maggie, you are correct about that. And that can be a loss in and of itself, Maggie. Just the loss of, us thinking they should know better, or having some sense of, I never judged my family until now. Does anybody have any other good examples of one of these categories of something you've lost during COVID that you're grieving? People, you have maybe an involuntary yearning for something, feeling lost, needing to reorient, grieving the loss of time. Andrew, do you want to say something about that?
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. When I say grieving the loss of time, I'm just kind of thinking about, for myself at least, where I am in my life and all of the societal expectations of what I should be doing and how some of that is delayed because of the pandemic. And I think that I probably get off easy because of where I am in my life, but I also think about people who are in their twilight years and are seeing this pandemic and are having to stay inside because of it and are having to spend those years or part of those years away from their loved ones, away from their favorite activities, things like that.
Yeah, I know there's people on this webinar that are grandparents. And for me, that was one of my granddaughters lives in my home, so there wasn't a loss, but another one of them does not. And because of COVID and the quarantine, I lost getting to see her ride her bike for the first time, or just spending time with her, her little tiny hugs. Those were things that really hit me hard during the pandemic. Catherine offered conducting / participating in in-person trainings. Catherine, can we take you off mute and you talk a little bit more about that? And while we're waiting for that answer, everybody else can keep typing in or raise your hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Catherine. Thank
Yes.
you.
So one of my primary functions is to train early childhood educators on engaging families. And so we have lost a layer of relationship. We had a bunch of new sites join us this year, people that I, to this day, have never met in person. And it really takes away that just sense of togetherness and developing relationships by, us having to communicate via Zoom as opposed to being in person with one another.
Yeah, Catherine. Obviously, Be Strong Families is, dealing with the same challenge. We were 100% in-person organization before COVID occurred. And we had to quickly figure out how to meet the needs of our partners in an online, on an online platform. But a lot of our trainers have the same yearning, because that deep sense of connection, of being close in proximity to other human beings, is missing. So I appreciate that. And Michelle said, I love the Zoom. Michelle, that's great. I'm going to use a double negative. I have nothing against Zoom. It's been a great gift to us at Be Strong. It's been a great gift to us personally, me personally. I've been able to see family and friends and do all of those things, but I still really long for time together in a room with a person. Who else? Anybody have that feeling of being lost, of needing to reorient? I know that for the first couple of months of the pandemic, I was ordering my groceries. And I remember the first time going back into a grocery store and putting on a mask and wiping down my cart and walking amongst people again. It was totally disorienting to me. But now I'm back at it and I love it. And I didn't know how much I missed it. Who else has got something? All right, Andrew, go ahead to that next slide. So there's a great quote here by Lisa S. Zoll, who's a licensed clinical social worker in Pennsylvania, and she specializes in grief counseling. So she said, people don't feel like they have the right to grieve. A year into this, the losses are piling up. I just had this conversation in my office when the person said, I can't complain about my grief because people have it much worse. But we have to correct that thinking. Your grief is grief. You can't compare it to other people's. How does that quote hit you all? We have now lost over 750,000 people in America, and it's extremely sad. But it doesn't take away the right for us to have our grief too, of these things piling up. I had to attend graduations for my kids, like a drive-through fashion. My kids didn't get to go to prom. Those things were real, and I did have a sense of loss, and so did they. What other things do you all have that are piling up like that? And how did this quote speak to that? I'm going to give you a second to think about that or type. Your grief is your grief. You can't compare it to other people's. Am I the only one in the room out of all 18 of us that have had a piling up? I read an article a couple of weeks ago about microstressors, and this really reminded me of that when I was doing my research for this webinar. I became short, like short-tempered, short to jump to judgment. Those things were the piling up of microstressors from the pandemic. I became spacey. Thank you. Oh, and Michelle, go ahead and speak, and then I'll go ahead and read some more comments.
Yeah, around here, we're dealing with things with my grandson. My granddaughter's birthday today. I've got 11 grandchildren, so some of them are graduating high school, so I started feeling, I'm at the point right now where I'm stressed, and I hold it in because everybody else is stressed and they've got things going on. So I try not to let them see my grieving, but and that's only because everybody else is so stressed here. Why add to the pot? If that makes any sense.
It does make sense. But your grief, Michelle, is your grief.
Yeah, I have a habit, a very bad habit. My mother says I hold things in probably more than I should have.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that people will say in the chat, me too, me too, me too. This is something that is, we don't want to be a burden.
No, I don't. And I always, in my house, and I know my mom said it's bad, but in my house, I put everybody first. I mean, it could be everything. I don't eat anything until everybody else is eaten. I won't buy myself or do anything for myself until everybody else is taken care of.
Yeah, I think that while that is noble, if you've heard me speak at other webinars, I have this phrase I use a lot, and that's you can't pour from an empty cup, Michelle.
Yes, we did a different one before with you. That's why I'm on this one.
I was going to say, Michelle, I recognized you.
Yes.
I'm sure that you heard me say that many times. I say it in almost every time I speak.
Yes.
We all tend to put ourselves on the back burner so we can minister to the needs of our families, our friends, our coworkers. We've been taught and conditioned that that's important. And I'm trying to do my part to relearn, to unlearn first, and then relearn that my self-care is important as well. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for coming on. All right. So Yamuna, I hope I said that right. If I didn't, please correct me. She said, I became spacey. Yamuna, do you want to come on and talk a little bit about that? I'll keep going on so you can get off mute if you'd like. Kate Chase offered, my dad passed away recently, and 3 other siblings, and see how each of us grieve differently. Kate, I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. And yes, as somebody who lost both of my parents pretty recently as well, I've seen how different people do this differently. Our grief is our grief. All right. And Yamuna said, again, still kind of there. Yes, the pandemic's not over. For Pete's sakes, we're still trucking along, and we're still trying to figure out what this new normal looks like. Maggie offered, I am more inclined to look at what I am grateful for when I have friends who have lost family, but it is a defense mechanism, albeit good practice. Yes. Thank you, Maggie. I'd love to hear more about that too. I have a gratefulness board in my kitchen that I routinely put things on, and I believe that helps me keep focused on the strength things. But we also need to reconcile with this grief, because without that reconciliation, it's really hard to plan for a new normal, what that looks like, how that could be. Catherine said, I turned 50 and received my master's degree during the pandemic, and could not host parties to celebrate. Oh, Catherine, I'm sorry. And congratulations. I brushed the disappointment aside because so many people lost jobs, homes, and family members. Yes. And it's still sad. You worked so hard to get that master's degree. And you deserve to be celebrated. And that is a loss. I hope when the pandemic's over, you will go back and you will celebrate with all your family and your friends. Michelle offers you congratulations. And yes, you're welcome, Catherine. Anybody else have something like Catherine's or Kay's or Maggie's to offer? A year into this, the losses are piling up. Andrew said, this quote from Lisa Zoll reminds me a quote about stress and grief related to drowning. It says, you can drown in an ocean or drown in the bathtub. The depth is different, but you're still drowning. Wow, Andrew, I love that. Thanks for sharing that one. I'm going to have to copy and paste that before I close out today. It's very true. And with all of this pandemic grief, there's not a lot of acknowledgement of it. So today I just want to collectively acknowledge that there's so many things that have changed for all of us. Some of us have had to change jobs, lost positions. Some of us ran out of supplies during the really intense isolation. Some of us lost loved ones to the pandemic. All of it deserves to be grieved before we can look at our new normal. All right, Andrew, you can go ahead and go to that last slide there. So how do we find our new normal? So number one, we just talked about, we need to validate our losses. We need to acknowledge them and say them out loud and see what they are. Maggie said, and the loss of freedom is extraordinary. Thank you, Maggie. Yes. So we need to name those things. Name those things that we lost. Number two is seeking support. And that's going to look different for all of us, especially in the midst of this pandemic. One of the challenges of disenfranchised grief is that we often suffer in silence. We don't talk about it because other people have it worse. So finding a support group or a therapist, reaching out to your friends to talk about your grief is really super important. Sharing helps, because oftentimes grief makes us feel isolated and alone. We think that nobody else is experiencing what we're experiencing. And there has to be somebody that's brave enough to bring it up. When people talk about it, you're going to hear the people saying, me too. Oh, I've been experiencing that too. So seeking support is really vital. Any comments on that one? Where do you guys find your support? Michelle said, I always help others. That makes me feel better. Yep, we're going to get to that one, Michelle, for sure. Are there other places that you have found support that is holding you up? All right, so number 3 is about creating a ritual. So funerals, memorial services, like even written obituaries, they're all rituals around death. And those rituals help us process our loss. So consider creating a ritual, that honors your loss. Consider, I don't know, maybe planting a tree, a flower bed, or finding some kind of like tchotchke, tangible item that represents your loss. It could be, I don't know, airline tickets for a trip you were going to take that was canceled. Maybe go out in your backyard and bury them. Host a pretend prom or a pretend graduation ceremony. It kind of sounds hokey, but these ritualistic activities help us to process any of those losses that we're dealing with. Some people get a tattoo. What we need to do is we need to help ourselves find meaning in that loss. Grief and loss don't make sense, and the rituals, those are a part of us finding meaning in that. What kind of rituals have you all done during this time? Watching the sunset. Thank you. And Jasmine's offering, part of my ritual is reminding myself to be grateful for what I have constantly. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jasmine. Anybody else? Waking up at the same time each day. Andrew, how does that help you? You can type or you can pop in.
I'll just pop in. So this is kind of a big change for me compared to when I was growing up. I think around the teenage years of the early 20s, I was like, I'm gonna wake up at 8 a.m. on the weekdays, and then the weekend I'm gonna stay up till 2 a.m. and wake up at 10 a.m. And that, I don't know, it gets draining, doing that. And I found that, especially in the pandemic, having set that ritual of like, okay, I'm going to go to bed at a certain time, and then I'm going to wake up no matter what at like 7 a.m. That's really helped me stay focused. I think, especially in a pandemic where I know early on where all the days kind of seem to blur together, having my day start the same like time really helped me feel like I was being organized and productive. And it's just a ritual that I've continued.
Thank you. Thanks for offering that. Maggie offered, when I hear birds singing outside, when I hear birds sung outside, I pause and take a moment to breathe in and out. What a great ritual. And Michelle offered, LOL, cleaning my home every week, same day, every week. Very good, Michelle. Anybody else have a ritual that has helped you get through the losses? All right, so let's move on to number 4, which is a favorite of all of ours, and that's helping somebody else. A lot of us pour into other people, but this comes with a pitfall. And so, yes, we want to help other people. I'm going to talk about that, but we don't want it to become a distraction. When we are distracted from our own grief, it often doesn't dissipate. It stays stagnant and will come back up. We don't want that to happen. So small acts of kindness help people cope with our own losses during the pandemic. I'm trying to think of some small little thing that has been done. So I know of people who lose parents. For myself, my parents are both deceased. And one of the helping somebody else is I adopted some older people than me. And so we bake them cookies once a month. We take them some fresh eggs once a month. And we just make sure that we're still kind of pouring in to the older generation because we don't have the opportunity to do that now. Maggie said, unconditional acts of kindness. Maggie, would you be willing to come on and talk about a couple of those? I'm going to give her a second.
There we go. Hi. Sometimes we examine the motives for why we're doing acts of kindness. It's sometimes you're expecting something in return, so that's not the kind of thing we're doing now. And for example, my husband and I were at a restaurant, and the person next to us, who we'd had a brief conversation about some craziness in the parking lot, and he wanted to apologize, and they bought us dinner, and without even letting us know they were doing it.
That's
so there are just and so smiling is an act of unconditional kindness. When you're with other people. It's so simple. It doesn't have to be extravagant or anything, but looking people in the eye. Mm-hmm. We're wearing those masks. We got to do some dancing around with the eyeballs here.
I find myself trying to be very expressive through my eyes. I probably look like a little crazy sometimes, but I agree. Like, I can't see your lips with a mask on. And so I want to see if your eyes are smiling. I love that. Jasmine said, I agree, Maggie. That's good. Anybody else have any small unconditional acts of kindness? Like, I've had people pay for my Starbucks or my Dunkin' Donuts in front of the line. I've taken a roll of quarters. I don't know if any of you shop at Aldi's, but you've got to put those, pesky quarters in there. I put quarters in those. Those make me feel good, like I'm moving forward, and not huge. It's not a huge expense, but it does make me feel great. That's awesome. Giving bigger tips to the wait staff. Thank you, Claudia. Yeah. Especially because the wait staff, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, really was challenged at keeping their income at that same level. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. And then finding small moments of enjoyment. So we don't need to force ourselves to be happy or put on a fake smile or, fake it till you make it, but try to find some things that you enjoy and do them. Joy is a lofty goal during this time. Sometimes the best thing we can do is find small moments of enjoyment. And those are enough of an escape that we get a break. What are some small moments of enjoyment you all have been filling your time with? I'm going to tell you mine. Mine is my chickens. I've never had chickens in my life, but I have gotten so much enjoyment out of them. I love going back there to, throw out some scratch and grain on the ground. And I love watching them. It fills my heart almost as much as watching my little granddaughter, play. Anybody else have a small moment of enjoyment? Bought a new bird feeder at my new house and watched them from my recliner chair. That's awesome, Kay. I love that. My husband bought me a bird feeder, a finch feeder, and we were getting the most beautiful yellow finches until my cat figured out they could capture the finches. So we had to take my bird feeder down. Yeah, Muna said, chickens, oh my God, my daughter is obsessed and gathers eggs and talks to them like they're people. Me too. I love that. And I love taking eggs over to friends and families' houses. That's great. Maggie said we rescued a dog on the side of the road. Wow. Oh, okay, you're feeding the squirrels too. That's awesome. I like to get outside and walk or spend time with friends. That's awesome. Reading spiritual affirmations. LaJuan, do you want to talk to us about your spiritual affirmations? Where you get them, where you find them, where we can find them? Do you have any good recommendations? You could put yourself, you could raise your hand and Andrew can take you off. Coffee is life. And the first sip of coffee in the morning, that's great. Those are beautiful. All right, one or two more people? YouTube or from my aunt. Okay, well, great. So just type in spiritual affirmations and see what comes up and see what resonates with you and in your hearts. And then the last one is attend a Grief Compass Cafe. So a lot of you know about the Be Strong Families parent cafes, the Vitality Cafes, the More Perfect Union Cafes, Dad's Cafes, Recovering Together Cafes. We have a set of questions that compile our Grief Compass deck. These are all questions. Andrew, you can go to the next slide. These are all questions that have to do with talking about trauma and loss. And if there was ever something that kind of be a tagline of the pandemic, navigating trauma and loss is it. So these questions are based on our vitality domains. So physical and mental and emotional, spiritual, financial, environmental, and social. And Andrew just put the link to those cards into the chat. So this is just a supplemental deck, but they really focus on navigating our way to a new normal. After the loss, we have to rebuild. We have to relearn, reinvigorate, reinvent new patterns, new rituals, new traditions. Colette's offering, I started hosting casual conversations for my licensed exempt providers to be able to come together every other week and just talk. We're on for an hour and it's great having an outlet for these providers. Many of them are caring for grandchildren. I love that, Colette. That's really awesome. And is really kind of what we're focusing on too as an organization with continuing on these webinars. We want to host a space for people to be able to come and share their story. Sharing our story connects us. Sharing our story dissipates grief. Sharing our story gives us strength. So those are really awesome things. So there's some questions I just want to highlight, and we can answer a couple of them, and then we can move on just to the last slide. Not yet though, Andrew, sorry. I don't want to confuse you. So on card 8, there's a question in the physical domain that says, what's helpful in this present moment? So today, if everybody could just put one thing in the chat, what's helping you in this present moment? Let's see how fast we can get that chat filled up. What's helping you in this present moment? And I would have to say, like for me, it is the Christmas baking. I love to bake cookies. I love to bake snacks for my family for Christmas. My husband's always like, okay, what's next Christmas cookies? Super excited. Okay, Colette offered my husband's positive outlook on life. Awesome. Maggie, making soups. Yum. What kind of soups are you making, Maggie? I made a squash and corn chowder the other day. Christmas weekend coming up. Yay, Jasmine. LaJuan says cooking. Kate Chase said spending time with the grandkids and their sports and other activities. Catherine, decorating, prepping for Christmas. Hallmark Christmas movies. You go, Brenda. You know, one year I said I was going to watch a Hallmark or a Lifetime Christmas movie every day until Christmas. And by Christmas, I was a sobbing mess. I don't think I've watched one since. Now I'm nervous to again. Maggie says clam chowder and all my mom's recipes. Oh, that's awesome, Maggie. Yamuna says presently the glass of water in front of me. The sunshine through the window outside. That's beautiful. Overall, the holiday break for me and the kids. Home Alone marathons. Everyone loves Home Alone. Those are so much fun. Michelle, been going through, and my sister has been helping me through it. Also being with my grandkids. Thank you. Anybody else? What's getting you through this present moment? All right. So card 11 is about social domain. I chose that question. And that is, when have you had to hide your grief and why? Why do you hide it? I would say for me is because my kids depend on me to be the strong, kind of statuesque one. So I hide my grief from them a lot. Colette, yes, she said, when you're always expected to be the strong one. Yeah, I think a lot of us are in that same boat, Colette. Yamuna said, I've hidden my grief when I didn't want others to know what I was going through. Yeah. And I think that really resonates with me, Yamuna. When visiting my parents, I didn't want them to worry. Genevieve offers, I also hide my grief from my two boys because they worry about me a lot. And Maggie, there's an ongoing feeling of loss with my newly adulting daughter, and understanding now is not the time to address it. It's okay to let time pass. Thank you, Maggie. Yeah. Anybody else? Why do you hide your grief? All right, let's do one or two more. Let's see. Card 21. Let's choose the spiritual question. Have you used dreaming or imagination to become more flexible and accepting of what is? A little bit more of a challenging question. Do you use dreaming or imagination to become more flexible and accepting of what is?
I could answer this one.
Okay.
I think that I have, especially my imagination, become more flexible and accepting of what is. But I think at the same time, it's using my imagination to think of what can be in relation to that, not just looking at what is and accepting it for what it is and just kind of moving on with my life. But, recognizing how it is right now and, thinking, imagining, dreaming of how it could change in the future, hopefully for the better.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think it's important. And for me, I have kind of played the game what if in my head. So if I'm flexible, what would happen? What would be the worst case scenario? What would be the best case scenario? And I think about that and I imagine in my head the different scenarios. And those really help me to look at it from different perspectives. Yes, I think of the positives to reframe the outcome I might not have expected. Thank you. I dream a better tomorrow, but remember to live and love today. Thank you so much, Yumuna. Maggie says, I've had to understand that my emotion of fear is not reality. My fear makes me project the worst case scenario. Living in love, you can be more empathetic and understand that change is always happening. That is a great what if practice. Yeah, you're talking my language there, Maggie. I do that because I used to be such a pessimist and kind of a doomsayer, and I would justify that by oh, it's just my personality. I want to be prepared for all of the different outcomes. And I still want to be prepared. And I'm still that same personality. But now the focus is more on what would the outcome be if I was flexible here? What would the outcome be if I let this go? So I love that what if practice. Anybody else? Have you used dreaming or imagination to become more flexible and accepting of what is? All right, one more. Let's see. Okay, so I think let's do card number 18 and the financial question. And that question is, how can communities create spaces that allow people to be with and support each other through whatever is happening? How can communities create spaces that allow people to be with and support each other through what's happening? What kind of spaces do we need as the community? We're the community. A lot of us are service providers. How do you create that space? We need safe and inclusive spaces. Yes, we do. How do we create those? What are some attributes of that safe and inclusive space? A skill that I'm really working on that is going to really lend itself well to creating a safe and supportive space is the suspension of judgment. So taking a step back when people are sharing their story. We need maybe something that says open to all. Yeah, that's great. That's a good start for sure. And I think for me, it was learning to listen more deeply, suspending that judgment, letting people show me who they are. More paid time off. Yes. Yep. For funeral leave, had to make arrangements and grieve. Yeah. I hear you there, Kay. You know, Be Strong Families has a very generous bereavement policy. And yet I'm not sure it's enough. And I'm not saying that to dig Be Strong Families. They've done a really generous policy. But when I lost my parents, I'm not sure that I was fully prepared to be back in work mode. Mental health days. Yes, for sure. Oh yeah, Kay, we have a little bit more than 2 days. That's really rough for a parent. Yes. A place to exchange what they have too much of. Yeah, thank you, Claudia. Good. Okay, Andrew, let's go to the next slide. So those questions were from our grief compass deck. These questions are just questions that Andrew and I came up with to kind of close out our time together today. So if we're talking about change and grief and what the new normal is going to be, in reference to that, how do we differentiate if change affects your family in a positive or a negative way? What do we do? What are some things that help us differentiate if that change is positive or negatively affecting our family? For me, this is where my suspension of judgment comes in. I have to take a step back because it could be both positive and negative. I've said that many times with COVID. There was a oodles of changes that happened with COVID, but one of those was that my son was laid off. My son and his girlfriend and their 2-year-old who live with us. So it was negative. It hurt his self-esteem. He wasn't feeling productive. And in the positive way, he got to spend a year and a half with his infant daughter and watch her grow. It's very rare these days that 2 parents get to do that, even if, one. Pay attention to behavior and maybe what the kids aren't saying. Do check-ins. Thank you. That's a great way. How else do you guys differentiate? If changes affect your family in a positive or negative way. Active and reflective listening go along with that. Good. Very good. Thank you, Maggie. I always did with my boys, side by side listening. So if I really wanted to know something, I'd take them for a drive in the car. My boys seemed to really like the lack of eye contact, and it gave them the freedom to speak, just to talk, or to be like playing ball or something where it's not such an intense, doesn't feel like an interrogation. Being open-minded. I need to think about what I say before saying it. My husband had to find a new place to work when he got laid off. Yeah. Thank you all for adding those things. And we don't know, like Claudia, it could be, I don't know your situation, but maybe it's a better situation. Maybe his new job has different benefits, different hours, different people. That's where the suspension of judgment comes in. When you can just wait before saying, oh, this was all negative or all positive. All right, Andrew, next question. All right. And I think this is the last question. How do we keep up with all this change? So we may say we all want a new normal. We want the routine. We want the behavior patterns. We want the traditions and rituals. But how do we keep up with this ever-changing rules, laws, pandemics, viruses? How do we keep up? What do we do for ourselves? Maggie said my son and I would make brownies or something in the evening. And while bonfires are great for chatting, if we weren't camping, a candle on the porch and start by chatting about his friends. Thanks, Maggie. Those are good. How do we keep up with the change? I think the one thing I'm going to implore everybody is self-care. We need to have a lot of self-compassion. We need to practice that. We need to make sure that we're taking optimal care of ourselves, eating healthy food, getting those negative emotions out there. Oh, I love this. Forget the rigidity of life. For me, there's more to life than following a schedule and knowing what's next or what to expect every moment. I started leaving my cell phone at home when I go places. That has been life-changing for me. Michelle said, I go with the flow as hard as it is. As hard as it may be, I try to spend time with my grandchildren who make me very happy. Andrew's offering, accept that change is inevitable, but I can have an effect on how that change manifests itself into my life. Yes. And I think that you having the effect, Andrew, could be from your lack of reaction and instead intentionally responding, taking that step back, giving yourself a breather. Thank you. Who else? Anybody else? How do you keep up with the change? Okay, Andrew, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so you know that we do a hashtag amplify, and today it's hashtag amplify change. So we're gonna throw up the ending poll. If you could fill that poll out and put your hashtag up. So my hashtag for this would be amplify. So mine's amplify self-love. I think that one of the things that gets me through multiple changes is deeply loving me and belonging to myself. Andrews is amplify response, not reaction. Awesome. Anybody else? Amplify my faith. Thank you, Lawan. Couple more people. Amplify empathy. Amplify self-care. Great ones. I want you guys to do me a favor. Write these hashtags down. Get at your desk, put them on a Post-it note. Put them above your computer screen. Think about them. Think about tangible things, small, significant steps you could do to embody those amplify hashtags. Amplify hope. Amplify keep the change. That's a quote from Home Alone. Thank you. Amplify self-care. Okay, good. Amplify new traditions. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, everybody. Okay, Andrew, you can go ahead and go to the next one. So here's our listing of our webinars for the rest of the week. So we have our Spanish webinar, and I wish I could tell you what that says, but I don't speak Spanish yet. Wednesday, we're going to be navigating the holidays, a guide for parents or caregivers of transgender, non-binary, and gender expansive youth. And that's going to be with Jenna Redmond. It's going to be a great, great informational time together. On the 16th will be another Spanish webinar. And on Friday, if you want to come and share your story, just get some of your feelings out, meet new friends, come to our Taste of a Cafe time. Every Friday at noon Central Time for an hour and a half, we put on a Taste of a Cafe. We do almost all of the cafe activities, and we do one round of the questions. So I hope to see you there. All right, Andrew, next. All right, so for the end of the year, we are doing our annual campaign, and that's our Show Your Love for Families campaign. This year, we're really amplifying the LGBTQAI+ community, and we're looking to build some resources for families who identify with any of those letters, and any of those communities could be an ally. We're looking to build some cards for parents. We're looking for cards for parents of LGBTQAI+ youth. So please give generously. If you've ever been touched by our webinars, you can go to our website and click the donate button. Any little amount can help. All right, thank you, Andrew. Super. This is Questionable, Curious Conversation, Endless Fun. This is our new game. And it is on our website. It is for sale. People were asking us to do kind of a cafe style game for families. And so this was Be Strong Family's answer. I spent all week playing this game, and I got to know my coworkers and their families at such a deeper level. It really enhanced the connections I have with them. Here's some great pictures of the fun we were having. It was just super. So that resource is also on our website. And the next one is about our YouTube. We have a YouTube. There is a QR code there in the bottom left corner. If you want to hit that with your phone, you can subscribe. And that's where we house all of our webinars these days. So hope to see you there. And is that the last slide, Andrew? Awesome. So on behalf of myself and Andrew Hitchcock, our lovely web tech for today, and all of Be Strong Families, I'm not going to see you again until next year. I hope you guys have great holidays, whatever you celebrate.